So I've been thinking about holding a grudge. And I was realizing that this month, it just came to mind because I'm remembering that something happened in my extended family 13 years ago, 2004. I won't go into the details because everyone knows about holding a grudge, but it's very sad that some members of my extended family are still holding on to a grudge to an event that took place in April of 2004. The event shattered part of this extended family. And so it's just very sad to see the effects of what this does to people, to countries, to the planet when we hold a grudge. So I first of all thought, well, let's see what the dictionary says about this word. I mean, just sound of the word grudge compared to bodhicitta, grudge. If I had a band, I would call it, in my teens, Grudge. If I had a band now, I'd call it bodhicitta. So here's some words that kick in with grudge from the online dictionaries. Resentment, bitterness, rancor, pique, umbrage, dissatisfaction, disgruntlement, bad feelings, hard feelings, ill will, animosity, antipathy, antagonism, enmity, and so on. Those are the nouns. Then we get to the verbs. Be resentfully unwilling to give, grant, or allow something. That pretty well captures it, doesn't it? Unwilling. And the origin of the word is quite fun. From late Middle English, it's from the word grutch, which means to complain, to mumble, to grumble. And from the old French, gruchier. Anyway, that's the background on grudge. Gruchier. I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly. So I was curious. I mean, I'm going to share the Buddhist perspective on holding a grudge, and I was also curious to know what other people think about it in the world. Interestingly enough, there's no difference really. There's a very nice article on this on the Mayo Clinic site, and it's titled "Forgiveness: Letting Go of Grudges and Bitterness." It's very good. So I'm going to share parts of this article. So it's, we're human beings. We're holding grudges. And the more we get on the cushion, the more we can start to sort of, sort out where those grudges that we're maybe not even recognizing are hiding. Some of them are obvious, some of them aren't. So if you're not from Canada or the US, there's a chance you may not know about the Mayo Clinic. It's quite famous on this continent. It's a non-profit medical practice and medical research institute, and it is based in Rochester, Minnesota. It employs more than 4,500 physicians and scientists, and they have 57,000 health staff. And they specialize in treating difficult cases through tertiary care. It spends over $660 million a year on research. So it's quite an impressive institute. So here's what they say about it, holding a grudge. When someone you care about hurts you, you can hold on to anger, resentment, and thoughts of revenge. I would say, when anyone hurts us, yes, of course. When someone we care about hurts us, yes. But I would say it's anyone. And the article then goes on to say, you can either hang on to that for the rest of your life, or you can embrace forgiveness and move forward. This is a medical site. So then they go on to say nearly everyone has been hurt by the actions or words of another. Perhaps your mother criticized your parenting skills, or maybe your colleague sabotaged a project, or your partner had an affair. These wounds can leave you with lasting feelings of anger, bitterness, or even vengeance. So then they go on to say, why is it so easy to hold a grudge? When you're hurt by someone you love and trust, and I would say by anyone, I'm going to extend this, you might become angry, sad, or confused. And if you dwell on the hurtful events or situations, grudges filled with resentment, vengeance, and hostility can take root. And if we allow those negative feelings to crowd out positive feelings, you will find yourself swallowed up by your own bitterness or sense of injustice. So, if I look at my own experience in holding grudges, That is absolutely so true. When I look at the situation with my extended family, there's one individual there who cannot let it go. Just can't let it go. And I see the pain it brings, not only to this person, but to the whole family. The whole group, in a certain way, is just frozen in time with this. So Venerable Children illuminates this from the Buddhist worldview by saying it like this. Anger is wanting others to have suffering and its causes. Forgiveness is letting go of the anger and releasing it. To have compassion for others, we have to be able to forgive them. So there it is right there. If we've got grudge holding going on in our mind anywhere, our spiritual practice is really hung up on a sharp rock, on a very sharp rock, a big rock. And then she goes on to say the obvious, that we know people make mistakes. We have the option of holding on to anger for them or ourselves, but holding on to anger only makes us miserable. When we learn to forgive ourselves for our mistakes, then we can also forgive others for their mistakes. It's kind of obvious, but not so obvious. And that opens the door to have a compassionate feeling towards others, which is what we want. It's what we all want. So then she goes on to say, if we're still holding a grudge, compassion is very difficult, isn't it? How can I want them to be free of suffering? They hurt me. I have every right to get revenge. They deserve it. And we go on with our own bandwagon, and that anger gives us a sense of power. It's completely ridiculous, though, because motivated by anger to retaliate, we just create more negative karma, and we get more suffering results in this life and in future lives. And as I was thinking about grudge holding this morning, I remembered a situation that I'd forgotten about, really. I probably was 5, and we had neighbors who had a very troubled son. And this one particular winter, we got these very cute, sweet little Siamese kitties. They were just so cute. And the first tragedy was that one of them got distemper and died. So that was a huge deal when you're a kid. And then about 2 weeks later, we found the other second little kitty outside the house dead. So we thought, well, what happened here? So one of my parents took the kitty to the vet, and the vet said, well, this kitty has died of physical trauma. I think somebody threw it against your house. So, in remembering that this morning, I see that I'm still angry at that person. I'll change his name, John. I'm still angry about that. I have been holding a grudge for decades, and I didn't even realize it. But when I do more work on this, I realize that John then was terribly troubled. He probably had a mental illness at the time, and at that point, probably no one knew how to even diagnose it. 20 years ago, I knew that he was in big trouble with the law, and he was just having a very wretched life. So people do things out of misery. So what are the antidotes to holding on to grudges? Well, as Buddhist practitioners, we know them, but we have to keep going back to these because, we all have anger in our mental continuum. We've had anger coming up in previous lives. We've got a lot of grudges hanging out. So I have a lot of work to do. So thinking of the disadvantages of holding a grudge is a very powerful way of getting at this. Now, from the Mayo Clinic point of view, they say, if you're unforgiving, you might be experiencing the following. You might be bringing anger and bitterness into every relationship and new experience you have. You might become so wrapped up in the wrong that you can't enjoy the present. You might become depressed or anxious. You might feel that your life lacks meaning or purpose, or that you're at odds with your spiritual beliefs. You might lose valuable and enriching connectedness with others. That's pretty powerful. This is from the Mayo Clinic. Things that can happen if we hang on. Venerable Children says, she's going to go back to why we're holding on to grudges. We're holding on to grudges because we're holding on to pain. We create this solid thing about how somebody harmed us in the past, and we just can't forget it. We have this grudge and we want to retaliate in some way, although of course we're much too polite to say that. As good Buddhists, we don't want to retaliate. So first of all, she says, we have to recognize that holding the grudge hurts us more than it hurts the other person. Really think about that, because that gives us the ability to later apply other techniques to letting this go. But she says, initially we have to be willing to question that grudge instead of just holding on to it and making it the center of our identity. We have to be willing to say, wow, this grudge hurts me so much. It hurts me more than it hurts the other person. Because the other person hurt me one time or maybe 5 times or however many times. But every time I think about what he or she did to me, I hurt myself again. Those words just really get me. It is so true. She goes on to say we really project this incredibly solid image of how some people behave towards us. We envision them as solid characters, not seeing any other aspects of their personality except that one particular quality that they happened to have at the time that they harmed us. So we focus on certain instances and qualities, and we say to ourselves, that's who the person is. It's really like looking at a photograph of someone, isn't it? That photograph is just a moment frozen in time. It's a 2-dimensional image, and yet we just say, that's who they are. That's all they're capable of. They're stuck. Can't change. So we really need to recognize that this way of thinking harms us much more than the other person, because regardless of what they did, they're living their life now, or they may even be dead. And they're certainly not thinking about it right now. But we can't let go of that situation, and daily harm comes to us by continually dwelling on it. In the case of my extended family, the 2 characters who got most of the blame died 4 years ago. But the grudge holding continues. Isn't that a tragedy? That's a tragedy. Then the Mayo Clinic says another thing to think about is that if we don't practice forgiveness, which is the antidote as well, then you might be the one who pays the most dearly. Instead, by embracing forgiveness, you can also embrace peace, hope, gratitude, and joy. So they say on their website, consider how forgiveness can lead you down the path of physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And Venerable Children says, forgiveness is simply letting go of our anger. It doesn't mean that what the other person did was right. It never means that. It doesn't mean it was okay. It's simply us deciding that we're tired of being angry because anger hurts us. And I think it's like a lot of things in our life. When we're really sick of something, when we really hit the bottom of something, then we're kind of forced to sort of re-examine it and let it go. So just acknowledging that gives us some ability to say, well, maybe I'm going to have to let go of this anger because it's not getting me anywhere. We admit that the problem at this present moment is not what somebody did to us in the past, but our current clinging to our anger and our inability to let go. And if we look at the current world situation with conflicts going on and countries threatening each other, it's the classic case of holding grudges, not letting go of any kind of past history. So the Mayo Clinic then gives a very lovely definition of what forgiveness is. Generally, forgiveness is a decision to let go of resentment and thoughts of revenge. That act can hurt or offend. That act that hurt or offended you might always remain a part of your life. But forgiveness can lessen its grip on you and help you focus on the other, more positive parts of your life. Forgiveness can even lead to feelings of understanding, empathy, and compassion for the one who hurt you. Forgiveness doesn't mean that we deny the other person's responsibility for hurting us, and it doesn't minimize or justify the wrong. You can forgive the other person without excusing the act. Forgiveness brings a kind of peace that helps us go on with life. I remember years ago I was working in a school where a particular person was always getting a lot of rings and expensive jewelry. And I one day commented on the new ring. And she said, yeah. And this is all she said. She said, I can forgive him, but I will never forget. But she was willing to forgive. So, according to the Mayo Clinic, what are the benefits of forgiving someone? Healthier relationships, greater spiritual and psychological well-being, less anxiety, stress, and hostility, lower blood pressure, fewer symptoms of depression, stronger immune system, improved heart health, higher self-esteem. So, from a worldly point of view, those are pretty convincing reasons to let go of stuff. From a Buddhist point of view, if we want to develop a loving heart and, eventually see others as, sweet and dear to us, we've got to get over that big mountain called grudge holding. I have a great story to share. I know this is going a long time. Okay, this is a long BBC. I heard this story years ago. I was driving out to Stony Plain, which is about a 40-minute drive from Edmonton, to go out to a Tai Chi class. I was in the car alone. I was listening to this evening program called As It Happens, and I will never forget it. I remember the color of the sky. I was heading into the sunset. I just remember the whole thing. I think it was April, and there was an interview with a father, an American dad, who had lost his son. This must have been around 2005. I don't know if we called the group ISIS yet, but anyway, his son had been beheaded. And I think he even saw the video of it. And they were asking him about his experience of working with this. And he said at first, his world absolutely shattered. He couldn't get out of bed. He was a total mess. He stopped working. He could do nothing. He was just immobilized by the grief. And this went on for a little while. And then one day he was looking in the newspaper and he saw a 6-month course offered at a local college on forgiveness. And I guess nothing else he tried was working, and he thought, what have I got to lose? So he went to this 6-month course. I think it only met once a week. It was like an evening course. Well, whatever happened there, I guess he had the karma. He was ripe for it. He was able to work with the loss of his son, and he was able to forgive the person who murdered his son. And he said, I know it sounds unbelievable, but I feel very sad for the person who killed my son because of what he's now living with. Then he went on to say the most amazing thing. The man who murdered his son was later killed by an American airstrike. It was either a drone or something, a bombing. And his friends called him up and visited him and said, fantastic. Aren't you celebrating that the guy who killed your son is now dead? And he said, not in the least. So he said, that man has a family. Now all his family are grieving his loss. How could I be happy about that? So, there are tons of stories online about people forgiving others who have done tragic things to loved ones. Go online and read those stories. It'll break your heart. And it'll give you the courage to look at where you're hung up.